Okay, guys, this is notes number 51. We are going to graph sine and cosine. There's a couple things I just want to go over with you really quick before we get started, so I just need you paying attention. Remember, sine are the y values of the coordinates of the angles, and cosine are the x values of the coordinates. I also want to point out that square root of 2 over 2 is approximately 0.7, and square root of 3 over 2 is approximately 0.9. So this would be approximately 0.7, 0.7. This would be approximately 0.9 and 0.5. So just pointing that out. So what we're going to do is we are going to graph sine and cosine. Normally the graphs will have the radians on there, but just to remember, pi over 2 is 90, pi is 180, 3 pi over 2 is 270, 2 pi is 360. I'm going to graph all of the 30, 45, and 60 reference angles all the way to 2 pi. So we're going to graph all of these angles, 30, 45, 60, 90, 120, 135, 150. We're going to graph all of these angles so you can see what it's going to look like. So this would, if this is pi over 2 or 90, then this would be 45 degrees. And then I just tried to go 15 degrees over and 15 degrees over. So for sine, we're going to start at 0. And if you look, the sine of 0 is 0. So that's where we're going to start. Then we're going to graph the sine of 30 degrees. The sine of 30 degrees is a half. So we're going to go up a half. This is 1, this is 2. So we're going to go up a half. The sine of 45 is the square root of 2 over 2, which is 0.7. So at 45, you're going to go up 0.7. And at 60 degrees, it's the square root of 3 over 2, which is approximately 0.9. 0.9. And then at 90 degrees, the sine is 1. So at 90 degrees, we're going to go up to 1. And then this would be 120. 120, the sine is square root of 3 over 2, which is 0.9. At 135, it's 0.7, and at 150, it is a half. So it's going to be at 0.7, and then a half, and then 180 degrees, the sine is 0. So we're going to keep on going around like that. So the sine of that is 0. Sine of 180 is 0. And then the sine of 210 is going to be negative 1/2. This, the sine of 225 is going to be negative 0.7. The sine of 240 is negative 0.9. The sine of 270 is negative 1. The sine of 300 is negative 0.9, negative square root of 3 over 2. The square sine of 315 is negative 0.7. And then the sine of 330 is negative 1/2. And then the sine of 360 is 0 again. So if we look at this, sine is a curve that looks like that. So what I did was I just plotted these particular angles that that are special right triangles, 30, 30, 60, and 45, 45, 90. So, and ones with those reference angles. So if I show you, this is literally graphing sine. If I start at 0, if I graph sine at 0 and let it go, it should start. Let me see. All right. Okay, so what's happening is that started at 0. It's starting at 0, and then it's going to continue all the way around. So it starts at 0, and it continues. So now there's sine of 90, which was at 1, sine of 180, which was 0, sine of 270, which is negative 1, sine of 360, which is 0. And then it'll keep going on around. So it'll keep adding 360 each time, and that will go on forever. So a sine wave acts kind of like a spring. So then as it bounces, it produces the same wave. A sine wave, the sine of 0 is 0. So the sine wave will start at 0, and then it'll, at 360, it'll then repeat. It'll then repeat that same snake-like pattern. But cosine, the sine of cosine, the cosine of 0 actually is 1. So at 360 degrees, it'll look like that. So we'll call sine like a snake right here. And then cosine, looks like this. Ooh, looks like this. But sine would be like a wave or a snake. And then if I actually put them both on the same graph, they're both actually the same thing. It's just shifted over. So cosine is sine that is just shifted over 90 degrees. So from here to pi over 2 or 90 degrees, it's just shifted over 90 degrees. So if we go back here, that's your sine. Now if we do the same exact thing for cosine, here, if we do the same exact thing for cosine, we're going to go all the way around, but for cosine, we are going to use the y values. So the cosine of 0 is 1. So here at 0, I'll go 1. And then the cosine of 30 is the square root of 3 over 2, which is 0.9. And then 45 is going to be 0.7. 60 is going to be a half. And then 90 is going to be at 0. And then 120 is going to be at negative 1/2. 135 is going to be at negative 0.7. 150 is negative square root of 3 over 2, which is negative 0.9. And then pi is at negative 1. 210 is at negative 0.9. 225 is at negative 0.7. 240 is at negative 0.5. And then 370 is at 0. 300 is at positive 1/2. 315 is 0.7. 330 is at 0.9. And then back at 2 pi, cosine is now 1. But it's important that you see, by graphing at least those, you can clearly see it's a curve that comes down. There are no sharp edges here, guys. So the hands kind of go like this. They curve, and they're going to curve back down like this. Oh, I can't get in the camera there. They're going to curve back down like that. All right, so that's important that you see. And it would keep going. It would keep going in this direction, and it would keep going in this direction. So that's sine and cosine with several angles. All we really need to know are the main ones, which would be 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. So if we figure out the main sine and the main cosine, then we can graph basically any angle that we want. So now here's the beginning of your notes. This is going to be number 51. We're going to graph sine and cosine. And then and amplitude. And I'll explain that in a minute. And amplitude. All right. So what we're going to do is we are only going to graph the first part of it, or just the main part. So we're going to graph sine. So this is sine. So our angles would be 0, 90, 180, and 270 and 360. Well, if you think about it, and I'll draw it up here, we already know all these values. So if we just draw our unit circle, at 0, the coordinate is 1, 0. At 90, the coordinate is 0, 1. At 180, I'm sorry, the coordinate is negative 1, 0. And at 270, the coordinate is 0, negative 1. So those are the coordinates we're going to be using. Those are all only the coordinates we need. We don't need the 30, the 45, and the 60-degree reference angles. All right. Most of the time when you graph trig functions, they do not do them in terms of degree. They do them in terms of radians. So just this would be pi over 2. This would be pi. This is 3 pi over 2, or 3/2 pi. And then this is 2 pi. All right. So then if I actually do y equals the sine of theta, so these would be our thetas, these would be our angles. So the sine of 0 degrees, the sine of 0 degrees is 0. The sine of 90 degrees, look at the y value, is 1. The sine of 180 degrees, look at the y value, is 0. The sine of 270 degrees, the y value is negative 1. And the sine of 2 pi is back at 0. So here's how sine works. Draw your graph. We'll say this is 1 and this is negative 1. So that's 0, and then just make 4 marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is pi over 2. This is pi. This is 3/2 pi, 270, and this is 2 pi at 360. All right, so now we're going to graph. At 0, if theta, this is your theta. If theta is 0, then my y value is 0. If theta is 90 degrees, my y value is 1. If theta is 180 degrees, my y value is 0. If I plug in the sine of 270, I get negative 1. And the sine of 360 is 0. Remember, you do not draw. It should not look like this. It should not look like that. Do not draw sharp angles here. You're drawing curves. So as long as you understand it's curved, then you don't have to draw all the extra parts. So it's a curve. And again, it'll keep on going this way in forever, and it'll keep going this way forever. These would be our negative angles, and then this would be 360 plus 90, 360 plus 270, 360, and it will keep on going. All right, so I need you all to look at the way this is, because if you can understand this part of it, then you'll understand all you need to graph any curve that we're going to do. Sine starts at 0, ends at 0, halfway between it's 0. Half of that is up at its highest, half of that is down at its lowest. So it starts at 0, ends at 0, halfway between it's at 0, halfway between it's up at its highest, halfway between it's down at its lowest. So I do start, end, halfway, halfway, and then halfway between. So you'll understand that. The period is 2 pi. So then the pattern repeats after 360 degrees. The pattern repeats after 360 degrees. So then it would continue the snake pattern again. Here, the maximum on this one is 1. That's the highest it's going to go, and the minimum is negative 1. Okay. So there's that one. Now we're going to do cosine. Again, you have 0. We're only going to be doing the main angle. 0, 90, 270, or my goodness, 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. That's going to be 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And now we're going to see y equals cosine theta. So remember, cosine is your x values. So if I look up here again, the cosine of 0 is your x value. So the cosine of 0 is 1. The cosine of 90 degrees is 0. The cosine of 180 degrees is -1. The cosine of 270 is 0. The cosine of 360 is 1. So there you go.